I think we're all students. So speaking about, I'm a student currently. I'm studying for a diploma in fine art, and there's a whole story attached to that. And I've worked with teenagers since mid-30s, really. And now I'm currently working with people from cradle to grave, really, young children, right the way up to the last client, in the older generation was in their 80s. And so I see everybody right the way through, and stress does seem to raise its ugly head right the way through. So might be a good idea. I'm aware that some people listening won't have any idea of the understanding that we're talking about. So it might be easier just to tell you a little bit about me and how I got into an understanding that I hadn't even heard of, and all sounded a bit confusing to me. And that's so as a very young child, I don't think I was considered the brightest spark in the box. Sat on a special table, knew I was different, not like others. And I lost my mother very early. I was 6, and then my father when I was 8. And so I sort of went through school feeling very different, not like other people, and certainly not talking about my feelings, and certainly feeling a lot of anxiety and stress through those years. At high school, I managed to keep my head down, avoid confrontation, avoid showing my feelings, talking about how I felt to anybody. But I got through my high school. It was a different setup then. And then I went off to another school, and just had this constant, well, it certainly was anxiety. I lived with sort of lots of families to begin with, and then a family who I guess can only be described as dysfunctional. And I was removed from there when I was 15 and went to live with some foster parents in London. And I would have said to you, I survived school. Any situation that was remotely stressful, I would send me into a tailspin, but I couldn't talk about it. I didn't know who to talk about it. I didn't trust anybody. And so I left school with the very basics of exams. Certainly didn't consider myself to be bright under any circumstances, and felt very different. I remember my friends would cry when leaving school. And I used to think, oh, I'd like to join in this crowd and show my emotions, show that I could cry when I was leaving school too. And of course the tears wouldn't come. I was so good at hiding how I was feeling. And I got engaged at 16, 15, married at 18. I didn't think that anyone could be attracted to me. There's a song by, I think, Janice Ian called The Pains of 17. I remember totally relating to that. So that was kind of me, very young, early life at school, a non-achiever, surviving school. As I say, I got married early. I had my daughter at 23, my son at 24. Now my son has Asperger's syndrome and has been one of my greatest teachers. He's an amazing lad. My marriage was slightly dysfunctional. That's probably an understatement, and I won't go into all the reasons for that. So we split up when I was maybe 33-ish. And at 33, somebody said to me, I used to talk about the arts the whole time. I was fascinated by painting, ceramics, loved the arts, loved to be around them. My father was a painter. But in my early life, one of the people that I was living with made a comment, and they said, "You're not a painter." I won a prize for art. And she said, "You're not a painter. Your father was a painter." And that comment stayed with me. And I wore it like an overcoat, like, oh, this is me. I'm not a painter. My father was a painter. And I remember going to an art class at school and I used to shake because it meant so much to me. And I kind of wanted to be a painter because my father was one, but then I heard that I wasn't and I believed it. And not everything that people say to you is true. And not everything you think about yourself is true. But at that time, I believed that to be the truth. So I took myself off at the age of 33 and took an A-level in pottery. And I had to write a couple of essays while I was there. And somebody said to me, "You know what? You're quite a bright spark, aren't you?" Well, I don't think anyone had ever said that to me. And I certainly didn't think I was. And I've always had a thirst for learning, but didn't do it until this time. And then the lecturer said, "Terry, maybe you'd like to take something called a BTEC," which had just come out at that time, which I took, and I passed, I got this distinction. And then I had a year out, sort of supporting my children, single parent. And then I moved to Leicestershire to take a degree in ceramics and had a lot of fuss made of me. And somehow I came out, I went to Loughborough College of Art. I came out with a first, who'd have thought, and became an art therapist and was absolutely fascinated, and always have been fascinated, by the way people think and what makes people do the things they do. Whilst I was doing the art therapy, and I worked with people in hospitals and in colleges and was sort of peripatetic, I remember looking at one of my clients, and he did have incredibly special needs. And my one thought was, "You've got special needs." And then I thought, actually, my son has very special needs. And then I thought, I have special needs. And then I started thinking about sort of a wider group of, actually, we've all got special needs. We all have special needs. That one thought took me into the world of education. I had to go back to college to get a maths GCSE, which I didn't have. And then my first job was as a teacher, was in a community college in Leicestershire. Well, I just thought I'd come home because I was with teenagers who I have a real affinity with. And I remember looking around the walls in the community college of the artwork, and there were vases of flowers, pop stars, self-portraits. But I just thought, what does this tell me? It's a pretty tough place. And I thought, what does it tell me about any of the students that are here? And so I wrote something at that time. I felt so passionate that kids should have a voice, especially teenagers, that I wrote something called The Identity Project. And I took a master's in it. So it was something like adolescent development and its relationship to art and design education. I think had a long title. But basically there were 3 questions. How do you see yourself? How would you like to be seen? And how do you think other people see you? Now, I had none of this understanding, the stuff that I've gone on to learn, but those questions felt quite important to me. And I'm sure I was asking them to myself as much as I was to the students. And I've just printed off a couple of things before I came online. And what was fascinating, these were young A-level students who would tell me that they weren't particularly aspirational, or they were telling me that they had nothing to offer, and who would listen to them anyway. And so with these 3 questions, they started to produce pieces of A-level artwork. Some of them had never worked in 3 dimensions or in colour. But I've got one student work here. So this, I don't know what you can see from there, but this is a papier-mâché box of chocolates. And on the selection here, you'll see there's a chocolate that's had a bite taken out of it. And she said, oh, that's the part of me that nobody likes. And they've taken the bite off. They've sort of seen me and they've put it down. They don't like it. There were students doing things like this. They were seeing themselves still. They wanted to be children, but they had to be seen as adults. And there was this sort of fight, adolescent fight going on for this control in their head. Were they still children? Were they still adults? Along with all the exam and the pressures that the exams that come with that. This girl, she did an incredible bag, which was nearly as tall as me. And there's a compass on here, and it says sort of nowhere, everywhere, somewhere, wherever. And there's a little piece here of netting that only some people could see through if they looked very carefully. And it was all about sort of how they hid their feelings. There's several images here. I won't go through them all. And that really struck me, how much these students needed to have a voice. And I said, well, where do you get the opportunity to have a voice within school? And they said, well, we don't. We have a tutor time, and if you get a nice tutor, they might pay some lip service, but we don't. But this was back in 95, so I'm talking a long time ago. I'm not suggesting that the system is like this now, but I'm saying that's how it certainly was. But what I noticed was that instead of producing a final A-level piece, having looked at the art history and producing a piece with all the experiments that go with it, students were producing 7, 8, 9, 10 final pieces. So what hit me was that as their thinking was changing, their images were changing. And that was so powerful. And not only were the images changing, these students started to write incredible poetry. They kept journals way, way over and above what you would expect someone doing for an exam. And then I got visits from students who weren't taking art, saying, look, we're not doing your subject, but we want to do your project. And so I was there and sometimes until 9 o'clock at night, working with teenagers who desperately wanted to have a voice and talk about either exam stress or how life was for them, or their thoughts, their beliefs, their values, their parents' values. Should they own them? Should they not own them? It was fascinating. Someone called Margaret Talboys came out to see me from, she worked for the government then, from the national curriculum. Now this has been written into the national curriculum for all schools. They could see that there was power in that. And so could I. And I still felt something was missing. And I'm a passionate person. I wanted it to be for everybody. And I remember some teachers saying, I'd like to teach a version of this in my subject area. But what became very clear to me was that it has to come from a certain place as the teacher. And so I did write a curriculum. But if you're going through a list of criteria for a curriculum and you're not feeling it, and the connection isn't there, then it doesn't have the same results. So it takes people to teach it that, in my belief, people to teach it that have an understanding of where those students may be coming from. I mean, and some of these students were just run-of-the-mill, nobody's run-of-the-mill, but just average students going through school. Things came up, there were people with anorexia, people with bulimia, there was some abuse happening that I hadn't known about, the school didn't know about. I mean, it was actually bringing up all sorts of things. Now that made me think, goodness, I'm not qualified. So I then started to study, as well as teaching, counselling. I wanted to have a look at counselling to see if that might help. I went to counselling myself. I went for a year. I told the same story for a year. I came, I saw this woman weekly to begin with, and then monthly. And I'm not decrying counselling under any circumstances, and I think that it's good for some people. But for me, I just found the time in between. I went back into my own head, and then I went back and told the same story a different way. It's like doing a painting that has a pattern on it and tearing a corner of the pattern out and sticking it on the next painting. The pattern was still there. It was just being repeated. So then I started to look at coaching. Absolutely fascinating. And I took that as far as I could take. You know, I've got, I don't know, executive, I've got, you name it, it's coming up my ears as far as I think I couldn't have gone any further in coaching. However, I eventually became something called an advanced skills teacher, and I couldn't bear the title, but it meant that I could get out and start speaking to other people in other schools, and speaking to other students. I then took something called an ILM, Institute of Leadership and Management, Level 7 in executive coaching and mentoring. But still I felt there's something missing. And to cut a long story short, because I want to get to other things, I ended up running an academy. When I went into the academy, the brief was to support the change of a culture in a school. I remember when I first went there were students sitting in corridors, legs, feet touching each other, food on the floor. It wasn't good. And I just felt there was a lack of respect in lots of areas, from some staff, from students. The connection wasn't there, and it bothered me. So sorry. Yeah, so it really bothered me. And so I remember pretty soon I went initially as the coaching director of teaching and learning, because I'm passionate about teaching and learning. I'm driven by it still. And I remember pulling some of the inset off timetable and just saying, look, we're all going to learn to do coaching. And that included site staff, admin staff, cooks, cleaners, middle leaders, senior leaders, you know, everybody. It got us into a room talking before it was then run out to the students. Now, within, I think, maybe 6 years, initially I would walk into a classroom and it would be like I was a piece of dirt on somebody's shoes. It's like, what are you doing in here? You know, we don't want you in here. You're not our type of person. You can't say, no, hang on a minute, let me tell you about my past. None of that is there. And so it was about building up relationships really quickly and connecting with some really love, because I never ever believed these students were broken, not for one moment, nor the staff. But I did think there was a misunderstanding. But after 6 years, I could walk into a room and it would be like, hello, miss, do you want to know what we're learning? The kids were in uniforms. There was a student commission that had been set up of students passionate about teaching and learning and talking about what helps them and supports them learn. Exam stress came into that. And I felt good when I left that school. I felt good. And I saw my students growing and changing and learning, and staff too. I have absolute respect for the staff at that school. But I thought, you know, I watched the culture change and it was time to move on. But what next? And so I thought, so passionate as I was about coaching, that I would take a doctorate in coaching. That's what I planned to do. But I had heard somebody speak maybe a couple of years before, because I used to take weekends off to go and study more that I could share with staff or students. And he mentioned a guy called Semmelweis. He spoke about the fact that we once didn't understand where germs came from and how we now wash our hands. And I thought, yeah, that's really interesting. That's true. We used to believe that, and now we believe this. That's really interesting. And then he spoke about a man called Sydney Banks, who, amazingly enough, did not profess to be anybody special. But Sydney Banks had an insight. And I heard Jamie talk about Sydney Banks, and I thought, now that's interesting. I've not heard anyone talk about that on any of my coaching courses. And I remember on one course writing, I think I had to write about 160 hours of coaching sessions up by hand, and then analyze the session. And, you know, I was analyzing for all I was worth. But anyway, what he spoke about spoke to me, but it just played in the back of my mind. And then I decided to do this doctorate. But I saw an advert talking about Sydney Banks and an understanding, and I thought, what's that about? So I rang someone called Johnny up, his head coach, and I said, look, I don't even think I can afford this for a start. It's a lot of money. It was more than my doctorate would have been. But still, I thought there was something to learn. And so I went along, I signed up to do a coach training with a new understanding, which is sort of subtractive psychology rather than additive. And so I went along to my first weekend, and if I'm totally honest, what I saw was, and funnily enough, Marina was there, but what I saw was people hugging each other, a lot of people hugging each other. It felt a bit new agey. I'd come from the world of education. I didn't see any great structure that I noticed. I think I was full of judgment, if I'm honest. I didn't want to be, and I welcome change, but I just thought, I don't think this is for me. And I sat through the first morning, and at break time, I went into the loos and I just cried. I just thought, I've just spent a shed load of money to join some new age hippie group. It's not for me. And then, bless her, somebody said to me, look, just, you know, if you really hate it, come and see me afterwards, but just go to the next session, and just go to the next session. And I was hearing that I'm not who I might think I am. I think that's what I thought I heard. The word love was mentioned. The fact that we're feeling our thinking 100% of the time, from moment to moment to moment to moment. And my thoughts at that, I thought, I'm feeling my habitual thinking from moment to moment to moment, because I have a lot of thinking. I certainly had a lot of thinking in that room. And then I was doing my first training outside of, so it was immediately after retiring from my previous job. And I was doing a training, a coaching training in a school in London, in Westminster, the following day, on the Monday. And I had a lot of thinking about that, because I'm secondary trained. And I just thought, I'm not going to be able to do this. And I had my PowerPoints carefully planned, my all my notes, my handouts. And I remember going in there, I've said this before, but I just thought, if I faint, they'll see that I've done all this preparation and I won't have to do it. And they'll know that I'm not really backing out because I've prepared everything. And as I was talking to these amazing, and I asked for whole school to be there, not just teachers, because I think a school is a community and it's about us working together. And I spoke about the diamond within. And I genuinely believe that people aren't broken and people are not in need of fixing. But I didn't mean that for me, you know, but I know that for other people. I know it. And so I drew a diamond on the flip chart, and I was saying to them that sort of, as we pick up so many labels, don't we? As life happens to us, you know, I had orphan, non-learner, thick, various other things, you know, unlovable, you know, lots of stuff was on my diamond. And that actually clouds over the diamond, because you then believe you're the poo. That's you know, I ended up thinking, well, that's who I am. If people really knew me, they wouldn't like me because I'm this. And I was explaining this to the staff. My PowerPoints were forgotten. I wasn't going through them. There were no carefully planned anything because I was totally in that moment with those staff. And I did have a little voice saying, what are you doing? What are you doing? But I carried on. Anyway, the training went incredibly well. I coach the head teacher at this school currently. And I've done several trainings for them. And it's just the most amazing place. But I came away almost laughing at myself. You know, did you hear yourself in that room? And did you see people nodding when you were telling this story? But I caught the train on the way home, and amazingly, I was in a carriage on my own. And then a different voice, I call it my wisdom voice. And I've had it all my life, and I didn't know I had, but said to me, come on, Terri, it's just you and me now. Be honest. Do you believe what you were telling those people in that room? Do you believe it? And quick as I can be, I said, I absolutely believe this. It was all in my head. I absolutely believe it. Nobody's broken. Nobody needs fixing. And I believe that our core is love. There are people who would argue with me, but I absolutely know that to be true. More than like I know my own name, because I could be any name, but I know it to be true. And this little voice in this carriage in my head said, well, that's great, but is it true for you? Now, for all my studying, all my training, all my efforting, all my striving, I didn't know it. And in that moment, the voice said, because if it's not true, Terri, you've shot your own theory in the foot. You've just been telling a pack of lies to an entire school. Is that what you want? Is that what you want for you? And I was on my own. I cried because it's the first time, Anne, that I genuinely knew me too. Oh, me too. Me too. And I came home that evening and I'm in the garden room. I sat in this garden room and I looked at, there's just some plants growing up a wall outside. And I didn't just see plants. I saw the nuances, the colours in the plants, the blues and the greens and the reds and it was as if, I don't know, I think in the Bible it speaks about scales being lifted from your eyes. You know, it was like that. And I was in this kind of honeymoon period for I don't know how long. I'm talking months, you know, it's just amazing. But then life started to creep in, as it does. I have a beautiful mentor called Jan Chipman, who I've had the good fortune to go out and see on Salt Spring. And when we speak, it really is just about getting into this feeling. It's not academic. What I can share about stress for teenagers and students, it's not the academic bit. Funnily enough, 6 minutes before I got onto this call, literally 6 minutes, a dental student that I'm working with currently just rang me. Within 4 minutes, she'd fallen back into that space. I had 2 minutes before I had to get onto this call. She knows, she understands. Now, within all of this, there's a shed load of stories of insights that other people have had when we've worked together. I'm still getting them. So is my life wonderful and perfect now? My life's ordinary. I love that. I don't have to be anybody special. But I think when my husband reminds me of somebody telling him, he said, when Terri speaks, she speaks to the heart. And this isn't about me, but this is about this understanding. It's about speaking to the heart. I work with, I was asked to go into a group of boys, 10 boys who were having various difficulties in their school. And I broke them into 2 groups of 5, very different groups. They get it. They get it so quickly. In fact, these boys are now ambassadors for their school. And that's no joke. They really are. But one lad who missed day 1, when the boys came in, the member of staff who introduced them said, "You won't get anything out of these boys." So there was an incredibly lively group of boys. And then there were the more retiring, not contributing in classes. And I thought, if I heard that when I was just introduced to somebody, I might not want to contribute either. So I taught them, I don't know, an hour, how to speak 1 to 10 in Japanese with pictures. It was just about making a connection with these boys. And then we went on, I got them, I don't know if you've seen these things called, there's so many things I'd love to share, but there's these things called blob cards. They're just amorphous shapes of people, like jelly baby people. And I remember saying there was a whole pack, how are you feeling right now? And they were rummaging and pulling out their card. It could have meant anything, but it meant what it meant to them. And I said, well, as you notice your feelings changing as we're talking, grab another card, tell me what that feeling is. And they were like this, because their minds were just going. But it got to the point where they weren't picking up any cards. There was a silence, which and what I was going on to say is the boy that wasn't there on day 1 in that group, day 2 came in the morning, and I said to the lads, "Can you still remember the Japanese?" And I can, konnichiwa, can you still remember the Japanese? And they were like, we can. So all 5 of the boys, that group, recited 1 to 10 in Japanese. And I said, well, what do you make of that? And then I said, well, hang on a minute. And I pointed to one lad. I said, you weren't here yesterday. Could you already speak Japanese? And he said, no. And I said, well, you're speaking Japanese with these boys. He said, that's right, miss. And I said, well, how's that happened? Now, these young lads had come into school at, I think, 7:30, rung the other lad, told him to come in, drawn him pictures, got him doing the actions, taught him. He came into the class, and then he was one of the group. So for people who aren't very good at participating, strikes me, they were brilliant. And not only that, they taught this other boy. So during our morning session, I had them for 2 days, and then I was in their classes. Just had a group of 10 girls for 3 days, another story. I said to this young lad, there was just a beautiful feeling in the room. Even their teachers had gone silent. And I said to him, do you mind me asking, what are you feeling right now? I meant to say, what are you thinking right now? And he looked at me. Now, he's with his peers, 11-year-olds. And he said, I feel loved. I feel loved. When we go quiet, there's room for new thought to step in there. Like for me on the train that day, there's room for new, fresh thinking. I met girls, 12 girls. I've split those into 2 groups of 6 because I'd been given a story about the girls beforehand. We spoke about the sunshine and, how we're born when we're babies and what are babies really like. And they were saying inquisitive, they like to have fun. They're in the moment. They were using their words for in the moment. And I said, that's so true. And if that was the sunshine, and that's kind of what we're born with, I went on to talk about the diamond. What do we tell ourselves? We were talking about diamonds. And I printed off here, just so you know, I'm not just giving you a load of rubbish. But these are the clouds across their sunshines that they did. And I looked at it and I just thought, they're saying, I feel hurted. disappointed, broken down, talking 9-year-olds, in pieces, hated, angry. I feel invisible. I'm down in the dumps. I'm disliked. I'm embarrassed, insecure, scared, confused, look away, melted, unintelligent, mean, cold, not determined, disconnected. That's pretty adult words for a child to use. We did this exercise where we blew these thoughts into a balloon. We blew the balloon up slowly. I can't show the photographs, but I would love to show you their little faces. They blew the balloons up very slowly and let the air out slowly. And they watched as the balloon deflated. And then I was saying, so what's the opposite to that then? It's an amazing thought you've ever had, or what's the best thing that's ever happened to you? And they could think very quickly of that again in the moment. We blew the balloons up quite quickly and they held them above their heads, and these farty balloons were flying all over the place. They let them go. And the atmosphere in the room really changed. And I was saying, what do you make of that? And they were saying, well, sometimes, these are 9-year-old girls, sometimes when we think those bad things, it seems like they're never going to go. It seems like it's going to take ages. And when we're really happy, it seems to just kind of go in a split second. And then I said, so we went back to their diamonds. And I must share this with you. I don't know if some of this is repeated because there were 2 groups. We were looking at who we really are, and obviously things went on in between, conversations, but no real academic teaching, but certainly an understanding of where thought is coming from and who they really are. And one group, they called themselves the A team because everybody had an A in their name. Loved, helpful, joyful, a good soul, clear-minded, kind, smart, peaceful, intelligent, friendly, unique, clean-hearted, innate beauty, resilient, bold, and calm. Now, you might think that I've given them some of those words. I gave them none of them. And the other group, beautiful, loved, optimistic, intelligent, unique, inquisitive, calm, joyful, strong, an A-star person, determined, accepting, patient, kind. We're achievers, calm, true. We're true to ourselves, have opportunities, glowing. Who we really are is found inside. Now that was just after a day of talking together, and they were putting their learning onto these sort of pipe cleaners. Just this kind of new understanding. And then eventually they read a poem by Jack Pransky to their class, What is a Thought? If anyone wanted a book, there's some good lessons for younger students in there. What is a thought? A thought is a lot. And that's by Jack Pransky. Also, Krista Kampser has written a book for teenagers and for younger students. There's also something called the Spark Inside, I think, or the Spark Initiative. And there's Terri Rubenstein's course, which teachers might be interested in. Oh, iHeart, it's called the iHeart program. And there's several other, there's lots of resources out there. But sometimes it's not about just reading those resources. And I know we want to get what this is about. You know, I sometimes ask people, where do you get your best ideas? And it's often not when they're under pressure of taking exams. And I'm currently coaching a dentist who's a student. And I sent you what she said the other day. Is it useful to read that, or would you rather I just posted that? Or
you go ahead and read it. There's and then Diane has a question as well, I think.
Of course, yeah, of course. Hello, Diane. So this is a current woman I'm working with. She was, when we first met, taking antidepressants, had been going for counselling, was at her wit's end. She's a second-year dentist student. She said, GCSEs to second-year university, I put so much pressure on myself each year for exams. I will work solidly from 8 till 5 each day, leaving little time for myself, and with a strict timetable for every single day I used to microplan my life, which left nothing enjoyable as my breaks were planned into my day. I exhausted myself mentally and emotionally, but that didn't matter as long as I was doing what I'd planned. Other people's revision used to worry me. Was I doing enough? Was it the same as them? Was I the same as them? What did they think of how much I'd done? I never realized what I was doing to myself until my mindset changed. I was cruel to myself. I beat myself up constantly and forced myself to work a set number of hours, even if I wanted to rest. Now, my mindset has shifted. I work for however long I feel like. I learn things quicker. I'm not stressed out by the thought of revising, and I don't care what anyone else thinks of how I revise and how much I do, as long as it works for me. I'm more relaxed about my exams. They don't worry me like they used to. I worry less after I've sat an exam, because what is done is done. Whereas I used to analyze the whole paper and try to work out what I'd done wrong, only worrying myself unnecessarily. I leave time for myself. I fancy a run, a trip to the beach, a nap, I do it. I realize life doesn't stop at exams. I guess the thing that's made the biggest difference is that because my mindset has changed and I worry less what people think, I found the best way for me. That's the best way for me to revise. Working solidly exhausts me, but working in little bits and taking time out means I'm more productive when I do work. And I allow myself those breaks because I don't worry what others think when I'm not working, whereas that used to constantly be on my mind. I used to believe my old thoughts, but now I'm free to be me.
I love that so much, because that's exactly like I was when I was a medical student.
Yeah, yeah.
And
you know, that comment, you're not an artist, your father was an artist, had me in its grip for, well, I'm 61 now. This is my 62nd year. So not until I was 60 have I picked up a paintbrush.
yeah.
And I'm now doing a diploma, and it's, I would have told you once that was, so even with this understanding, a blind spot, because yeah, okay, I get it. I didn't see it. And now I see it, and now I'm painting. But I'm still reminded that I have blind spots. There's still areas I don't see it. But it's the best show in the world, I think. It's the best gig in town. It's the best, I'm so glad that I heard of Sydney Banks and what he and others have pointed to. Yeah, amazing. Diane's got a question. What's her question?
So Diane, do you want to speak, or do you want to come on the video, or did you just want to speak? Oops, sorry, you've unmuted yourself and I muted you. Sorry, you can speak again? No, we can't hear you. Oh.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi, thank you, Anne, and thank you, Terry, for organizing this. My question, Terry, is 3 days is a short time for children to understand something that I'm seeing incrementally. So, and it amazes me that children hear it, see it, feel it I think their disposition to new stuff is so much better than someone who's practically 52. So I have a niece who is who will be 11 and who is having lots of anxiety and stress. She's only going to school for 1 hour a day, and I've been noticing issues with feeling loved because she has said to me time and time and time and time again, "You don't love me."
Oh, okay.
Now, I've tried to convince her, but it's useless. So I think my question to you is, how would you explain to a teenager or to a 10-year-old that her thinking is not real? It's her thinking is everything that starts in our head, and we know, and it feels real. We're always in the feeling of our thinking from moment to moment to moment. So how do you explain that? I really want to be able to give her, I'm going to ask her to watch this, this understanding that has helped you, because I mean, you helped me. I think you were the first person who said to me that I am love, and it hit me, and I've just been becoming more expansive in these past 2 years. I've changed radically, and I wish that my niece, if there's a gift that I could give her, is this, the gift of having mental peace. How would you explain it to my niece?
Well, I think you've asked two questions there, and thanks for that. Firstly, how do children get it in 3 days? I would be doing you a disservice if I said that's it and I walk away. So I have a Skype call with said 12 girls on Monday. Actually, it's not this Monday. Oh, yes, it is. It's this coming up Monday. So I have a Skype call with them, and they know that I'm still in the conversation with them and their teachers. So I don't just swan in, do this and swan out again, and then there's nothing left, because I think it's really important to stay in the conversation. So that's in answer to your first question. And secondly, your niece. If I think back to when I was 10, I have to tell you, I felt about as unlovable as a 10-year-old could feel. I felt worthless, unworthy. I didn't even want people to look at me. And, you know, that didn't go away easily. And somebody telling me, "Terri, you're feeling, you're thinking," I may have politely listened, and I may have politely, I probably wouldn't have said very much, but I probably wouldn't have understood that. Somebody telling me I'm feeling my thinking, I don't think I'd have understood that. But what I would have understood is someone coming into my model of the world, someone sitting next to me, someone being warm to me, someone, if I felt that someone who'd got where I was coming from, had a sense of how things really were for me, and spoke from that place. I mean, it's very clear, Diane, you love your niece, you know, I have no doubt about that. But I remember I've been a seeker my whole life, and I remember going to a Christian retreat centre in Lancashire. And I remember a woman coming to me to speak to me, and I said, "Don't do it, don't do it." And she said, what do you think I'm going to do? I said, "You're going to hit me on the head with a Bible." And I didn't want to be, I don't know what I wanted, but I didn't want to be hit on the head with a Bible. And I think we can be, with those of us that have actually been touched by this understanding, so want other people to get it. I think it's just really getting where she's coming from, her world. It's not, and I don't know what I would say to her. It would depend who I was sat next to in that moment, that person. and what I might say to her, I might say differently to somebody else that I was sat next to. It would just, so you know, like I said, I can't give you a manual and say, read this. But what I would definitely do is want to really connect with your niece and just look at the world from her eyes. I wrote this story a little while ago called The Snot Gobblers. And it doesn't seem to matter whether you're 5 or 90. People go, oh yeah, I understand that. And it's about the kind of thoughts we make up in our head. They were called snot gobblers. And I think I put a little animation of it on Facebook. But people responded to even that in very different ways. And so I can teach a whole class, but you know, I went into a school where I was reading, you know, I was told this is a particularly unruly class, you know, year 10 students. I didn't know what I was going into. And I didn't know what I was going to say, particularly. I knew I had my story. But I told them a bit about how life has been for me, not in any great detail, a bit like on here. And then whilst they were doing their snot gobbler animation or whatever they were doing, some were working in 3D, some were writing stories. I then was able to go and sit next to students in the room. And then I remember one girl saying to me, do you really believe everybody has a diamond? And I said, I do believe that. And she said, well, I just want to see mine. So she didn't see it in that moment. She didn't see it in that moment. But it doesn't mean it's not there. It doesn't mean it's not true. So I don't know what I would say to her, Diane, but I'd know what I would say when I was feeling connected to her in that moment. There's loads of resources out there, loads.
I've never told her that she was in the feeling of her thinking. I've never even broached the subject with her.
Yeah.
But okay, thanks for your answer. And
Okay.
thanks, Terri.
That's right, darling. So tons of stories, lots, you know.
One more comment that Jessie Lynn says, what a beautiful conversation. Thank you.
Oh, bless you. Hello, Jessie Lynn. Hello.
Oh, and it has been lovely. So you said lots more stories, but that's, you mean you've got lots more with you?
So much to share, but I'm kind of aware of time, and you know, I'm happy to talk to you about anything. If you ask me a question, I'll answer it. But, or we can wrap it up here. It's entirely up to you.
There don't seem to be any more questions. Has anyone else got a question at all? Oh, that's Diane again. Would you read the snot gobbler story? Have you got it with you?
I don't
think
know
you. It's on Facebook. I know. I saw it the other day. So
well, you can see the animation. Actually, someone's asked me to make it into a kind of Mr. Man book, and then bring the characters to life. For me, it's just time at the moment. So if anyone out there would like to support with that, I'd welcome a conversation. But I write lots of stories, and I often read stories to students because I find that, you know, when you shape it, you've heard this, I know, through your conversations with other people, but when you shake a snow globe up and you've got all this thinking going around, it's really hard to kind of even concentrate on a story. But I do find through storytelling that I notice people's minds settle. Mine too. So, in fact, one school I was going into, I actually bought you can buy picture frames that are like a snow globe. And I put a picture of the students I was working with. And then I was able to go in the next day and I shook it all up and I just stood it on the side. And whilst it was settling, they were saying, that's amazing. That's so interesting. And it was just them. It was them without the stuff. And I talk about being connected, you know, when I'm with people, we talk about being connected. And the more conversations I have, the more people I speak to about this, the more, I don't know, the more I feel connected to me, except when I'm not. And I thought that I would have told you again, you know, I am. Someone said to me, you can't love other people till you love yourself. I do. But it's only of late I can see the depth of the possibility of all of that. I still have my moments. I still get caught out, but much less so than ever I used to.
Yes, that last story from the dental student I thought was lovely demonstration of the difference it can make, just having the understanding and all the programs that you spoke about. I know that from what to answer partly what Diane was saying as well, was that all of those programs go step by step by step with the classes in the same as you do. It's not like, okay, so big changes might happen in a day or 2 days, but they then go back and take it another step and another step and another step in the same way that you're saying. So it's not, but it is still amazing what can happen in one day.
Yeah, amazing. I took a head teacher out. We were walking along the beach and she was speaking to the sound of her worrying about a particular group of people. And this little voice in my head said, tell her, go and sit. And I thought, I can't say this. I can't tell her to go and sit. And it was sort of drizzling with rain. And we did go and sit. And I remember saying to her, you know, what would happen if we just collected some of that seawater in a bottle? And she said very, very logically, you know, well, the sand would settle, the silt would settle, the salt would settle. And I said, what would we be left with? And she said, well, clear water. I said, yeah, my understanding is that that's our natural state. That's the water's natural state, certainly. But this voice said to me again, tell her the world's unfolding as it should. And I went through that. I can't say that. It's not appropriate. It's not even relevant. Anyway, 3 times it came into me. So I said to her, if I were to say the world's unfolding as it should, does that mean anything to you? She said, no. Not really. I said, that's okay. We just carried on with our conversation. Didn't really have any particular thinking about it, but it just came into my head to say it. She chose to miss 2 trains home. She got the last train she could get. We'd had a lovely connected conversation throughout the day. She went home saying what she would do about it, her agenda. And then I said, oh, just send me a text to let me know you got home safely. And then while she'd gone, I got back to my house and I looked up, what am I saying? The world is unfolding as it should. And it was the poem Desiderata. It says in it, you're a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. You have a right to be here. Whether or not it's clear to you, the world is unfolding as it should. So I copied Desiderata, sent it in a text to her, and by return of text, she took a photograph in her lounge of an A1 poster that was opposite her sofa. Now, she had seen that poster every single day, and she hadn't seen it. And, you know, we don't have the time now, but I think there's a whole nother conversation for what do you make of that? What do you make of that? And that's just one example of hundreds now of examples of amazing, insightful things happening. And I just believe that as we still our minds, we allow for something else to come in.
Yeah, that's so good. I love it when those things happen like that.
Yeah.
And as you say, they're happening all the time, but we just don't notice a lot of the time.
No.
When you're looking out for them, it's they're there a lot more. You notice them a lot more, and it's such good fun. I love it, looking out for things like that. You
Yeah.
can't make them happen, but it's like, oh yeah.
And as for seeing this understanding, some people have these orgasmic, like, wow, this amazing thing has happened, like me on the train. But for other people, it's just a gentle, yeah, I get that. No bells, no whistles, no, just, yeah.
And for some people, it's not even that. Some people don't even notice having that. And then they notice that things have changed. They notice that they're doing things differently and that things are different in their lives, and that they're not acting in the way that they were acting before. And they haven't even noticed that they've had an insight, or that something has changed in them.
If I'd have met, Sydney Banks would be nice, but if I'd have met, well, I've got it. I do meet people, I've got it in Jam people, my friends, my family, my husband. Love really is surrounding us. If I'd have seen that as a younger child, I would have saved myself years of stress and anxiety, I think. I just felt like I was a lone soldier, warrior, armor plated, getting through. Doesn't have to be that way.
And it's not I have a plane going over again now.
Right here.
Yeah, and although my story isn't the same as yours, the dental student was exactly like I was when I was a medical student, exactly. And nobody told me. So I didn't learn what she learned then and how that changed. So I went on doing that for years, which is part of the reason we're here sharing this.
Yeah, and the nice thing is that she's now talking to her friends. That's lovely. I'm going to stop there, I think.
Yes, that's it. Lovely. That is lovely. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for inviting me. This is such an amazing thing to do, because, as I was saying at the very beginning, some people will hear something in this, some people won't, but there's so many people speaking that there will be nuggets in there for everybody. I've been really impacted by some of the people I've been listening to. Just incredible. So thank them and thank you. Amazing.
So all of these recordings, the recordings of this and all the other recordings of the days before and the days coming, are on YouTube, on the Secret of Everything channel. And also you can find out more details at thesecretofeverything.com, and you can find out more about Terri. And
I think for me, I've just given you my email address, and you feel free, if anyone wants to write to that, or I'm on Facebook. But I've actually taken my website down, because I find that my work comes through word of mouth, and I think I prefer it that way. Just amazing how it's worked out. So yeah, so feel free to email or Facebook if you would like to.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you so much. That's been lovely. Bye, everyone. Thanks for being here.
See you. Take care. Bye, Anne.
Bye. See you later.